You clicked because somewhere inside you already suspected that the quiet hunger the Amish practice on certain mornings is doing something the rest of us paid doctors to explain and never understood. Here is the claim I could not shake. The Amish do not fast to punish their bodies. They fast because they discovered, generations before any laboratory did, that an empty stomach opens a door in the body and in the spirit that a full one keeps bolted shut. And they have quietly kept that door open for almost 400 years, while the rest of us were taught to eat 5 times a day and call it health. I stood in a plain kitchen in Holmes County, Ohio, on a cold morning in the fall, and I watched an old man push his plate aside before communion season and say, "The stomach must be quiet before the soul can hear." I laughed to myself. I was wrong to laugh. By the end of this, I'll show you a document from 1632 that names this practice out loud, and a Nobel Prize from 2016 that accidentally proved the old man right. And I promise you this works in the ordinary house you are sitting in right now. No farm, no church, no permission. Let me pull this thread from the beginning, because the beginning is stranger than you think. I grew up believing hunger was an emergency. That's the truth. If my stomach growled, I fed it. If I felt lightheaded, I reached for something sweet. I spent most of my life treating the smallest signal of hunger as a problem to be solved immediately, usually with money, usually with something in a wrapper. And I want you to notice something about that belief before we go further. I never chose it. Somebody taught it to me. Somebody profited from me believing it. Because here's the first clue, and it bothered me for weeks after I heard it. The Amish, some of the healthiest rural people studied in North America, do the exact opposite of what I was taught, and they have lower rates of many of the illnesses that empty modern bank accounts. Researchers at The Ohio State University and other institutions have spent years studying Amish communities precisely because their patterns don't match ours. And one of the patterns that kept turning up was this: they let themselves be hungry on purpose at set times as a matter of faith. Now, I assumed this was just poverty dressed up as religion. Old people going without because times were hard. That's what I thought. But that's not it at all. In the moment I understood why, the whole thing cracked open. Because these are not starving people. An Amish table at harvest is one of the most abundant sights you will ever see. Bread, butter, meat, 7 sweets and 7 sours, pies lined up like fence posts. These are people who could eat any time they want. And that is exactly what makes their fasting so strange. They choose emptiness in the middle of plenty. Nobody does that by accident. Somebody, a very long time ago, learned something. So I started asking what they learned, and the answer took me back further than I expected, back across an ocean, back into a century of fire and hiding, back to a book most people in this country have never held. But before I show you that book, I have to tell you about the day, because the day matters. The Amish don't fast randomly. They have a specific day, tied to their 2 communion seasons, one in the spring, one in the fall. In the days leading up to communion, many congregations observe what the old German-speaking families call the Fasttag, the fast day. On that morning, breakfast simply doesn't happen. The family rises, they dress, they read, they pray, and they go without food through the morning hours, sometimes until the main meal, as a deliberate act of preparation before the most sacred gathering of their year. And here is the detail that stopped me cold. When I asked why the fast comes before communion and not after, an Amish grandmother told me plainly, "You do not fill the cup that is already full." she meant the soul. But I want you to hold on to those words, because by the end of this, I'm going to show you that she was also describing something happening inside every cell of her body, something a Japanese scientist won the highest prize in the world for discovering, and she knew it in her bones without ever reading a single page of biology. Therefore, the question became sharper, not softer. Where did a farming people with no medical degrees learn to time their hunger so precisely, and who decided the rest of us should never learn it at all? Let me take you to the book now. In 1632, in the Dutch city of Dordrecht, a group of Anabaptist leaders sat down and wrote out what they believed, article by article. It became known as the Dordrecht Confession of Faith. And to this day, it is one of the foundational documents the Amish still hold to read to baptismal candidates, referenced in their churches, printed in their own language. This is not vague ancient wisdom. This is a dated document, 400 years old this decade, that you can look up by name. And inside the practices that grew up around that faith, fasting was never treated as strange or extreme. It was treated as ordinary spiritual maintenance. The early Anabaptists, the spiritual ancestors of today's Amish and Mennonites, fasted the way they prayed and sang, as a normal part of a life turned toward God. They took it from the oldest instructions they had, the accounts of Jesus fasting 40 days, of the early believers fasting before every major decision, of prophets who put down food to lift up prayer. But here is what the history books gloss over, and what took me a long time to piece together. These people were being hunted in the 1500s and 1600s. Anabaptists across Europe were arrested, tortured, drowned, and burned for their beliefs. Their sufferings were collected in an enormous book called the Martyrs Mirror, first printed in 1660, a book still found in Amish homes today, often the largest book in the house after the Bible. And once I understood that, the fasting stopped looking like a quaint ritual and started looking like something forged under pressure. These were people who had learned the hard way how to be steady when everything was taken from them, how to stay calm with an empty stomach and a hunted life, how to find clarity and courage in exactly the conditions that break the rest of us. Fasting wasn't a burden they carried. It was a strength they had discovered, the discovery that a body trained to go without does not panic, does not crumble, does not beg. It waits, it sharpens, it endures. And once I understood that, the fasting stopped looking like a quaint ritual and started looking like something forged under pressure. If you want to go deeper into every layer of this, the history, the specific practices, the science behind why it works, and the other buried Amish traditions that follow the same pattern, I spent a long time putting all of it together in a series of books called Amish Foundations, Amish Mastery, and the Amish Blueprint. They are available in the description below. Everything I am walking you through today is mapped out in full detail there, the way I wish someone had handed it to me before I spent years stumbling toward it, one conversation at a time. If this is landing for you, those books will take you the rest of the way. Now, back to what those hunted people actually carried across the ocean and why it matters to you right now. Therefore, they didn't just survive persecution. They came out the other side with a practice, tested in the worst possible conditions, that they carried across the ocean and planted in the soil of Pennsylvania and Ohio, where their descendants quietly keep it alive to this day. Now here is where the mystery deepens, because I had to ask the obvious question. If this practice is so old, so proven, so simple, why did I never hear a word of it growing up? Why was I taught the exact opposite? And that's when I started noticing who benefits from my hunger. Think about it with me for a moment. Every time you eat when you are not truly hungry, someone sells you food. Every snack between meals, every keep your energy up, every never skip breakfast or you'll ruin your metabolism, follow that advice backward, and you find an industry that grew rich on the idea that you must be eating almost constantly. I lived my whole life inside that idea. I never questioned it, and it cost me not just money at the grocery store, but years of feeling foggy and heavy and dependent on the next meal to feel normal. The Amish were never inside that system, that's the thing. They were never marketed to. They never watched the advertisements that trained 3 generations of us to fear an empty stomach. So they kept doing what humans did for thousands of years before anyone was selling breakfast cereal. They let the body rest from food on purpose, and they noticed it made them stronger, clearer, and closer to God. But I know what you might be thinking, because I thought it too. Maybe it only works for them. Maybe you need the farm, the church, the whole plain life for any of this to matter. Maybe a person like me, in an ordinary house, with an ordinary schedule, can't touch this. So let me speak straight to you now, because this next part is for exactly that doubt. You do not need to be Amish. You do not need a church calendar or a farm or a single special tool. What you need is one morning, just one. And I'm going to give you the plainest version of what I watch those families do, stripped down to what fits inside the life you already have. Here is how you begin, and it is almost embarrassingly simple. Tonight, you eat your supper as you normally would. Then you stop. Nothing after supper, no evening snack, no midnight bite, just water if you want it. You go to bed. And in the morning, instead of reaching for food the moment your feet hit the floor, you don't. You drink water. You have your coffee or tea, if you take it, black, without the milk and sugar that would break the fast, and you simply let the morning go by without eating. That's it. If your supper ended at, say, 6 in the evening, and you wait until noon the next day for your first bite, you have just given your body 18 hours without food. 18 hours. And you will have done exactly, in principle, what an Amish family does on their fast morning before communion. Now let me tell you what happens in those hours, because this is where the old grandmother's words about the empty cup turn into hard science. For the first several hours after you stop eating, your body runs on the sugar stored in your liver. But once that runs low, somewhere around 12 hours in for most people, which is why the length of the fast matters, your body flips a switch. It stops looking for outside fuel and starts cleaning house from the inside. And the name for that house cleaning is the whole secret. It is called autophagy. Autophagy. The word comes from Greek and it means almost literally self-eating. When you stop feeding your body from the outside, your cells begin to hunt down their own damaged, worn-out, broken parts and break them down and recycle them. The junk that accumulates inside your cells over years of constant eating, the malfunctioning bits, the debris, the body finally gets a chance to clear it out, but only when the stomach is quiet. Only when you are not constantly pouring in more. Do you hear it? You do not fill the cup that is already full. She was talking about the soul. But her body, on that fast morning, was doing precisely what she described, emptying itself so it could be renewed. And here's the part that made me sit down when I first read it. This is not folk belief. In 2016, a Japanese scientist named Yoshinori Ohsumi was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine for his discoveries about how autophagy works. The highest scientific honor on earth, given for understanding the exact process that the Amish trigger every fast day without knowing its name. Researchers have connected this cellular cleaning to protection against a whole list of the illnesses that drain older people's savings and steal their final years. The Amish grandmother had no idea a man in Japan would one day win a gold medal for explaining what her grandmother taught her. She just knew the fast made her feel clear and light and close to God, and now you know why. Therefore, the fasting was never really about going without. It was about making room. Room in the body for repair. Room in the spirit for prayer. And once I understood that both were happening at the same time, that the clarity of mind those families described was not just spiritual poetry, but a real physical brightening as the body cleaned itself, I finally understood why they said fasting attracts God. Because when the body quiets, the noise stops. The constant low hum of digestion, of blood sugar rising and crashing, of the restless search for the next bite, it all goes silent. And in that silence, people have reported for thousands of years that they can hear something they could not hear before. Call it prayer, call it clarity, call it the still, small voice. The Amish simply arrange their whole spiritual year around the discovery that an empty stomach makes the heart able to listen. But I told you at the start there was a hidden truth waiting at the end, and I have not given it to you yet, because there is one more layer to this, and it is the layer almost nobody knows the specific way the Amish fast that separates it from every crash diet and every modern fasting fad you've ever seen advertised. And it changes everything about whether this actually works for you. Let me set it up, because I stumbled onto it by accident, the way I stumble onto most of what matters. I had assumed, like most people, that a fast is just about not eating. Take the food away, wait, done. But when I watched more closely and when I asked more questions, I found out the Amish fast is not built around the absence of food at all. It is built around what surrounds the food. And that difference is the whole reason theirs has lasted 400 years while modern fasting fads burn out in a season. Here is what I mean. When a modern person tries to fast, they usually white-knuckle it. They stare at the clock, they count the minutes, they fight their hunger with willpower alone, and they lose. Because willpower against an empty stomach is a fight the stomach usually wins. That's why most people quit. The Amish never fight their hunger that way. Because for them, the fast is never empty. The hours they would have spent eating, they spend doing something else, reading scripture, praying, working quietly with their hands, sitting in stillness before the communion gathering. The hunger is not the point. The hunger is just the doorway. What they walk into on the other side of it is the whole reason they do it. And that reframe is the thing I most want you to take from this, because it is the difference between suffering through a fast and actually receiving what a fast has to give. When I stopped treating my morning fast as not eating and started treating it as a quiet morning with something to do, the hunger nearly disappeared. It became a companion instead of an enemy. It became, honestly, one of the most peaceful parts of my day. But I promised you a specific discovery, a buried one, and here it is, the piece that pulled this whole mystery together for me. When I went digging into how the old Anabaptist and Amish communities actually structured their fasting, past the vague descriptions into the specifics, I found the pattern that made everything else make sense. They did not fast to lose weight. They did not fast for a longer life. Those things came as gifts, as side effects, but they were never the goal. They fasted always before something sacred. The fast was tied to communion, to repentance, to preparation, to a decision that mattered. The hunger was always pointed at something larger than the hunger, and that is the hidden truth the title promised you. Fasting doesn't attract God because you are impressive to Him for going without. That's what I thought at first, and I was wrong. And the old man in that Ohio kitchen corrected me without even trying. Fasting attracts God because it empties you body and spirit at the very same moment so that there is finally room for something to come in. The autophagy clears the cells, the silence clears the mind, and the intention, the pointing of the whole exercise at something sacred clears the heart. All three at once. That is the door the Amish found and kept open for 4 centuries, while the rest of us were sold the idea that we must never let ourselves feel hungry for even an hour. Now let me hand you the practice in full, the real one, the way it was meant to be done, so you hold the whole thing and not just a piece of it. You begin the night before by finishing your supper and then stopping. No snacking after. This is the easiest part, and it is also where most of the benefit is quietly won, because so much of modern overeating happens in the dark hours in front of a screen. You sleep. Sleep is doing half the work for you, because you are fasting while you rest and never feel it. You wake, and you do not eat. You drink water, plenty of it. If you take coffee or tea, take it plain. And then this is the part the Amish would never skip. You fill the morning with something that matters to you. Read, pray, sit with the people you love, walk, work with your hands. Do the thing that feeds the part of you that food never could. The hunger will rise, and instead of fighting it, you let it point you toward whatever you're doing, and you notice how clear your mind becomes as the hours pass. And somewhere around the 18-hour mark, if you go that long, or even at 14 or 16 when you are starting out, your body has already begun the deep cleaning that a Japanese scientist won a Nobel Prize for describing, and your mind has already found the quiet that the martyrs found in their cells, and you have joined in the smallest and most ordinary way a practice that has survived fire, water, persecution, an ocean crossing, and 400 years of the world trying to sell you the opposite. Then you break the fast gently, not with a feast. The Amish do not gorge after a fast. They return to food the way you'd wade back into a cold pond, slowly, with respect. A simple meal, something warm, and you notice, maybe for the first time in years, that you can actually taste it, because a body that has been quiet tastes food the way a rested ear hears music. I want to be honest with you about the money too, because I know that matters to you the same way it came to matter to me. When I stopped eating out of habit and started eating out of real hunger, my grocery bill fell. Not by pennies, by a noticeable amount, month after month, because it turns out a great deal of what I used to buy I never needed. The snacks, the extra breakfast I ate without thinking, the food that went to feeding a habit instead of a body. The Amish were never spending that money in the first place. And now I understand it was never only thrift that kept their costs low. It was wisdom. They knew something about hunger that made half of what I bought unnecessary. So think about what you were told all these years. Never skip a meal. Always keep something in your stomach. Eat the moment you feel the smallest pang. Every one of those instructions kept you buying, kept you dependent, kept you a little foggier and a little heavier and a little further from the clarity that was always just one quiet morning away. I don't say that to make you angry, though I was angry when I first understood it. I say it so you can see how simple the thing they took from you really is, and how easily you can take it back. You take it back tomorrow morning, not with a program you pay for, not with a supplement, not with anything on a shelf. You take it back by doing what a hunted people did in a Dutch city 400 years ago, what a Nobel laureate confirmed 8 years ago, what an old man in an Ohio kitchen told me while I stood there too proud to believe him. You let yourself be hungry on purpose, pointed at something sacred, and you let the door open. Here is what I most want you to carry away from all of this. Something was quietly taken from you, not a possession, but a piece of knowledge so old and so simple that its disappearance had to be arranged, because no one forgets something this useful by accident. You were taught to fear the very hunger that would have healed and steadied and clarified you, and you were taught it by people who profited every time you reached for food you did not need. The Amish were simply never in the room when that lesson was taught. That is their whole secret. They kept the old knowledge because no one was there to sell them the new lie. And if you felt, for years, a quiet suspicion that some of the most important things were hidden from you on purpose, that real health and real peace were never supposed to be, this dependent on what you buy, then you already understand this in a way that people half your age never will. That suspicion of yours is not cynicism. It is memory. It is the part of you that remembers people once lived free of all this and could again. So let me ask you something specific, and I truly want your answer. When you read that, the Amish grandmother said, "You do not fill the cup that is already full." Did that land differently for you once you understood Autophagy was doing the exact same thing inside her body? Tell me in the comments, did you already sense, before this video, that your body needed emptiness as much as it needed food? I read these and I answer them, and this audience says wiser things than I do, so say it plainly. And if you are the kind of person who believes real knowledge has been pushed aside to keep you paying, then you belong with the rest of us who are digging it back up, one buried practice at a time. Come with us. There is more, and it is close. Because the next thing I want to show you is the Amish way of using a single ordinary root, one that probably grows within a mile of where you sit, to do what people now pay a fortune at the pharmacy to accomplish. I found it in the same corner of that Ohio farm, and once you see it, you will never walk past that plant the same way again. Stay close. We are only beginning to open the door. I'm glad you stayed to the end. Here's where it goes deeper. Inside the plain living circle, I pick up right where we just stopped, walking you through the full Amish fast day rhythm, morning by morning. And if a question stirs in you, ask me directly, and a real person, me, answers you myself. You won't be doing this alone. Just point your phone's camera at the code on the screen. Cancel any time with one click.